Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 405. Meeple Nation, January 2022 news.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Upgrade your game night with a beautiful game topper. They have all sizes to fit any table you have in your home. They have accessories, gorgeous mats that you can decorate your table with. Do you have a specific game that has a theme, such as one of my favorites, a pirate theme? They have a pirate mat that you can put down on your game topper.
Didn't you order the Cthulhu one as well?
I believe I did.
I am so looking forward to that because that one looked amazing.
They are gorgeous mats. I have several mats. Some of them are not game topper mats, and they are not anywhere close to what game topper. The quality and the beautifulness, and they have a stitched edge around the entire mat. They're thicker. They are absolutely beautiful mats.
Yeah, they're definitely better.
Check them out, GameToppersLLC.com.
We are your hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Logan Howard.
And I am Andy Holliday.
Go to our website, meeplenation.com. Check it out. We have blogs. We have photos. We have links to past episodes. You can read our bios. You can email us at meeplenation@gmail.com. And we now have a Patreon page. Jump on over to our website. You can find a link for our Patreon. Give you the opportunity to support us if you like our content. We would definitely appreciate that support. As we're talking about support, we're always interested to find out what is something that, as far as bonus content, you as a listener would like. Reach out to us on our email, meeplenation@gmail.com, and let us know what kind of bonus content information you would like. Would you like to know?
Question. If they wanted Dave to say goodnight to them at the end of the episode, is that available as well?
You know what? That could totally happen.
Wow, you guys. You guys going to even ask my consent before you do that?
No.
Okay.
Not really, no.
I think I'm going to go donate now.
So we'll make that one of our stretch goals. Anyone who donates, we will make sure that Dave whispers and tucks you into bed at night.
This week, we are talking about January news. It's kind of exciting to be recording the beginning of the year and talking about the new stuff for the new year.
Last week we talked about stuff that we were excited about. January news time, we're going to do more of a flashback to 2021, the last few weeks of the year, and talk about stuff that we did and played during that time.
Typically, if you've been listening long, you know when on our news episodes, we generally will start off with some highlights, our gaming highlights. And so why don't we start there?
That sounds like a great place to start.
One of my highlights is that my schedule changed so I can come to game night, and then COVID happened. So it was bittersweet.
That's right. We were struck by COVID.
This side of the table was hit by it. Now, I guess Andy's family was affected as well.
I didn't get it, but my kids all decided to pass it around over Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Made for a unique holiday for sure.
Yeah.
I got it. Dave got it. Did anybody else in your house get it?
Yeah, Noodles, my Nola, she had it as well, but it was just us two in my family. But then my brother, several of his family, didn't get COVID, but they got a pretty wicked something that was probably just as bad or worse than what we got.
The case of COVID was so mild that had you not tested positive, Dave, and announced that you had tested positive, I don't think I would have ever considered the fact that I possibly had COVID.
Right.
Very fortunate. Had some fatigue that went with it. Other than that, didn't have any respiratory issues. I didn't have any congestion issues. I guess I did get a little bit of a cough, but nothing. I always have a cough. I guess that comes with old age.
Seriously old age. The thing that was worst about it wasn't the effects of feeling sick, right? The worst part about it was over Christmas, we had this great plan of having all of my family over to the house for Christmas Eve. We normally do, right? We normally all get together somewhere. A week before that I had to tell everybody, hey, we need to make new plans.
So then I volunteered to host, and then we got it. So yeah, it was bad.
It was fun, though, is that Christmas Eve, Andy and I, because Andy didn't have to quarantine, we were able to go to our friend Doug's house for game night. So that was fun.
Prior to COVID, we did get the opportunity to go to Doug's wife's school and talk to some of the kids about board games there. Lydia, Doug's wife, was doing a program where she had a small group of kids. I was 12 kids, I believe it was. Through this project, this class that they were in, they were each to develop a game. To prep for that, they played several games, and they invited us to come in and talk to them and to play some games with them and to give them a different perspective maybe of the gaming world they didn't have. And so these were 10 to 12-year-old boys. Talk about who we are and what we did and how we got into the hobby, and then play some variety of games with them to give them a kind of a wider breadth of experiences so that they could have a better understanding of board games and different types of board games, mechanics and such that are out there.
It was interesting to see which ones they played and then were drawn to. First day I brought the DC deck building game. Every day that I went that week, that was the first thing they asked me. Did you bring the DC deck building game? Definitely one of the favorites for some of those boys. Really enjoyable to introduce them to a world that really had never seen before. I mean, there was a few of them that kind of had a taste of board games, but most of them had no idea what really the board gaming industry or what gaming world really is as far as board games are concerned. To introduce them to that, have their eyes open to, oh my gosh, that was really fun.
Speaking of the DC deck builder game, one of their first questions they asked me when I showed up on Friday, because I was only able to go Friday, and I show up and the first thing they ask me is, hey, is Andy coming? Hey, is Andy bringing DC deck building? And I was like, oh yeah, nice to meet you guys.
Andy was the superstar for sure.
But it was really cool because on Friday when I was there is actually when they were presenting their projects. I play tested a few of the games with the kids in their quote unquote finished state for their project. I was able to just do some last minute suggestions, like I just suggested rotating player start, and I explained it to him. He was like, wow, yeah, that's fantastic. It was interesting just to see how far they were able to take the games in just a week.
I wish I hadn't missed that. I forgot that Friday was an early day and I had planned on being there, and I unfortunately missed them playtesting the games they had created. But my goodness, what a cool activity to be able to do, is to get these kids to be creative and actually make their own game after a week.
This was definitely one of my highlights as well. Really glad that Lydia and Doug reached out to us to ask us if we would mind helping out with that. I got to go multiple days. Kids were cool. They had a blast, it really seemed like. In fact, one of the games, not my favorite type of game, but I just loved that this kid had the idea. Mafia is a game that several of these kids had played. And one of them, his game was basically he took Mafia and put it to a monkey theme.
Yeah, so there was no death and murder. There was,
right.
I'm stealing your bananas.
Right? And like he had different types of monkeys, and he printed out cards and laminated them with different types of monkeys, and they all had names, and they all had different powers. And it was just, I was just like, you know what? Great job. That was really cool.
So we played this with them. My favorite part is the fact that Logan got taken out first, like usual.
They didn't really even know him, but they knew to take
No,
Logan
it was
out
Dave.
first.
It was Dave. It was Dave.
I had to stick with
He had to
the
keep
theme.
the theme. Even there, I wasn't expecting to last very long.
What other highlights do you guys have?
One of the positive sides of COVID hitting my home over Christmas, I got 86 plays in December, and most of that was the last week of the month.
Holy smokes.
Yeah,
So it was the first time ever you had more plays in a month than I did.
yes, that is accurate. So I had 486 plays for the year, and 86 of those were
Wow.
in December, most of them the last week. December was a very gaming heavy month. With work, I have that last week break. We shut down. So I was home. The kids were home. They couldn't go anywhere.
I
Played
bet
board
Amara
games.
loved that.
Oh, yeah. She was thrilled. I even got my other kids to play. And Caden, we got him Skull for Christmas. We actually introduced that to my in-laws over the Christmas break, too. And it is actually my second most played game for the year.
Wow, it jumped up that much?
It jumped up that much because the kids went crazy over it. They had so much fun. Sabrina and I, her sister came up from Texas, so we went over to visit them, and we took Skull with us. It's such a great game to introduce to people. We played the heck out of it there at that party, too. I think I had maybe 4 plays prior to that, and it jumped up to my number 2. Popped the pig down to number 3.
So speaking of Pop the Pig, our New Year's Eve party, Andy volunteered, was voluntold maybe, I don't know. I asked Andy.
With a strict tone and a "you better listen to me" eyes.
Exactly. If he would cook some pork for our baked potatoes New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve was on Friday, and he needed to start the pork on Thursday night. So instead of having the regular game night here, packed up and went over to Andy's house. It was awesome because it was just like Andy had said. Here comes Carson marching around the corner with this pig tucked under his arm, and he plops it on the table and just kind of looks at Andy. And so I was so excited, I was like, "Here, Carson, I'll play with you." And so he brings it over to me with a smile. I got to play Pop the Pig with Carson. It was great. He loved it. Then as soon as he beat me, he picked it up and he went over to James, who was ironically the only other person that hadn't played it with him, and just plopped it in front of James and started to set it up. And James was like, "Oh, I'm playing now?" And it was great.
He's good at the voluntold as well.
I loved that I got that chance to play Pop the Pig with Carson.
Just had a big old smile on my face when he came around the corner with Pop the Pig in hand. I'm like, yep, here we go. Game night's on, apparently. I got to play King Domino Origins. I actually really liked it. I think it's a huge improvement on King Domino. King Domino's a great game for kids or people first being introduced to games, but Queen Domino is far superior than King Domino.
It's a different game, right? It's far more challenging. It's more of a gamer's game.
Yeah, I mean, it's a light gamer's game, right?
Still, yeah, for sure.
I think King Domino, I would consider that very much a gateway game. Origins, I don't think it's quite as complex as Queen Domino is. So you have mammoths, you have flint, mushrooms, and I think there's one more token that's on there. Anyway, and you score points for each token that you have in your kingdom. Plus, you have volcanoes. There's no crowns like you have in King Domino and Queen Domino. There's actually fire. That's your multiplier for the different land types that you're playing. The cool thing about the volcanoes is, depending on if there's one volcano on some of them, 2 volcanoes on one of them, and 3 volcanoes, and that's just on one side of the tile. If there's one volcano, then it can shoot that fire up to 3 spaces away. If there's 2 volcanoes, then it can shoot the 2 fires, but they can be 2 spaces away, and the 3 volcano can shoot 3 fire thing, and it has to be adjacent. You get either a 1 fire token, a token with 2 fireballs on it, or a token with 3. And it just adds to that multiplier. So it adds a different level of strategy to the game. I thought it was well done. Far superior to King Domino. I do like the fact that you can add buildings to Queen Domino that add a lot more effects and a different layer of complexity to it. It was still fun. I got my daughter a game called Point Salad. Have you ever played that, Nathan?
Not before New Year's Eve, no.
It's a fun little quick game. One side of the card is a way to score points, and the other side is a vegetable. On your turn, there's 3 columns. There's a deck at the top of each of those columns, and 2 cards that are flipped with vegetable side face up below each of those decks. And you get to choose whether you take a point card off the top of the piles, or you take any 2 vegetables of the 6 that are showing. Gameplay follows around like that. You take 1 or 2 cards, depending on what type of card you're taking. You're just trying to score the most points. And there's different ways to score points. Those point cards can be you have the fewest carrots in the game and you get so many points, or have the most carrots, or every carrot gives you 2 points, every onion gives you -1, and every pepper gives you -1. You have to try to get point cards that are going to work well together and try not to get point cards that are going to give you negative points for the stuff you're trying to collect. And it gets a little tough at the end of the game because sometimes you're forced to take something you don't necessarily want that's going to give you negative points. She's loved that game, and it's simple enough that she can teach it to other people and do a good job teaching it, yet it's still a fun game to play.
Yeah, she was excited to teach it on New Year's Eve when my wife and I sat down with you guys to play. She did great teaching us, and it was a game my wife enjoyed, so one that I might pick up because it's something that's accessible for her, easy and quick to play. So
I love the playtime on it. It plays so quick, it makes it really nice, especially for a filler game or something like that. Waiting for people to show up, waiting for people to finish a game. Great filler game. I also got to start Hero Quest with my kids. They have loved it, some more than others. I think my son Caden is a little obsessed with it.
Is this the new version? Or
this is the brand new one that just released in 2021. Definitely a different perspective, being an adult and all the games that are out now versus when I was a teenager and first played this. There are dungeon crawler games that are substantially more fun, but there's definitely the nostalgia factor in it, and the fact that it's simple enough that my 12-year-old boy can play it, really enjoy it, and understand exactly what's going on and not be overburdened with complex rules. I got one more, which was we got to break out Shadows of Brimstone again, but we got to break out into the Forbidden Fortress, which is an Asian-themed version of the game, and that adds samurai to it and ninja, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fun when we played this the other night.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. It tends to bog down with 6 players.
It bogged down. I think it's more 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Is like the perfect number.
That's the prime number for it for sure.
I think 5 is stretching it with that game, and I think it would help if it was 5 players that were invested in the game. If you check out in between your turns and you're like not involved, don't know what's going on, and then you're just like, oh, it's my turn? Okay, let me try to absorb everything that's happening. It tends to bog it down more. Turns take longer and whatnot, because it's kind of like a Firefly in my mind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where if I can be thinking about my turn, talking to people about my turn, like, oh, hey, don't go in this spot because that blocks me from doing this ability. Oh, okay. And because it's purely cooperative, I think the game's fantastic, and it's one of the games on my short list for BryceCon.
I like it.
It's a good one.
You know what was actually an amazing game too? Terraforming Mars. Ares.
That actually was a great game. We played that with Doug. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the fact that we took a picture of it and sent it to Dave made it even better. Because
Dave couldn't play because of COVID?
Yeah, Dave couldn't make it because of COVID.
For having super negative experiences playing Terraforming Mars where it got bogged down, where it would like so long in between turns. This happened to Andy, and I've had my own experiences with Terraforming Mars. It was a great, somewhat simplified version of Terraforming Mars. Still very enjoyable. I look forward to playing it again without Dave.
So we talked a little bit about this a while back. I have written down the 3 of us, Logan, Andy, and I, are going to play Terraforming Mars.
While Dave watches? Yes, fantastic.
While Dave is not present. And then at a quick time after that, the 4 of us will play Terraforming Mars because, Andy, you put forth that you wanted to test that out to give Terraforming Mars another shot. Put that down as something I'm going to try to arrange, that 3 of us are going to play Terraforming Mars, and then the 4 of us are going to play Terraforming Mars.
I remember only committing to half of that statement.
Yeah, I like
Actually, it's on the episode, so you go back 4 episodes ago, and you said, I would like to try it without Dave, and then try it with Dave.
Maybe I said I'd be willing to, not I would like to.
No, I believe the term was, I would like to.
I might have to go back and listen just to make sure that's accurate.
I still think if we give that an opportunity to try it without Dave and then try it with Dave. I mean, I know Dave is a heavy analytical person, and so that does tend to bog down the game a little bit. I don't think Dave takes as long as we accuse him of taking.
You know, it's not necessarily, and this is one thing that I think that they fixed with Ares Expedition. I think they fixed this issue. In fact, I know they did. So with the action cards, the blue cards in Terraforming Mars, they just basically give you actions so you can keep going and going and going and going after everybody else has passed. So you can step away, which is what I usually end up doing. Step away from the game because you've passed and everybody else has a million turns left because you don't have all the blue cards that they've picked up. I guess I don't like it because you basically, in order to compete, you have to get a lot of blue cards. And I don't like being cornered into a specific strategy in order to win. Whereas with the Ares Expedition, you can gain a lot of blue cards, which gives you lots of action, but all those are played at once. It's very similar in style of play Race for the Galaxy, where you play a card for the phase that you want to act in, and everybody else does the same. Everybody acts in all of the phases, but if you played the card, you get a special benefit. It just made the game so much more streamlined. Everybody's basically taking about the same amount of time on their turns. Everybody's doing the same things.
Played with 4 people. I think that's the max you can play on that game anyway.
I think so.
But we were playing with the 4 people. Half the time, it was only 2 actions we had per turn anyway.
Yeah, exactly the same action. And then that happens in Race for the Galaxy too. I just think it plays
It helps
a lot.
streamlines it,
It
though.
really does. And you don't have that, all right, I've passed, so you guys let me know in 45 minutes when you guys have decided that the round is over, and I'll come back and we can do the next round. It doesn't happen with the Ares Expedition, which was a breath of fresh air, because that was one of my big peeves about that game. I don't care for games like that, where there's so much downtime for certain players.
I get that for sure. Because there's nothing worse than the temptation of pulling out my phone, playing a game, or flicking through social media instead of being committed to a game.
Yeah, absolutely. Not that Terraforming Mars is a bad game, because it is a good game. I actually have enjoyed it. There's just a few issues I have with it, and that's one of the big ones.
You know, another game that we played pretty recently that I have enjoyed as well is Oceans. So we played this at Doug's house, which this is something that we've talked about with Lydia, Doug's wife. The board game hobby is fantastic. There are so many games out there. Just because you meet another friend with board games doesn't mean that you own all of their board games. Yes, there are some overlap, but there's a lot that's not. Oceans was a fantastic little game, building this little ecosystem of fish. People play down cards, they create predators, they create filter feeders, the whales and whatnot. You have a hand of cards, go through and you would add traits to all of these about how they interact with each other. You are interacting directly with everybody else, trying to keep fish on this little scorecard next to the fish. They have little fish tokens that you need to keep next to the card. Whole goal is at the end of your turn, have at least one, if not two of those, depending on what round it is, to score as victory points that you pull off.
If you can't pull off a proper amount of fish, if you don't have enough, then that creature dies.
Yeah, that species goes extinct.
Right.
It was really interesting, the complexity that it could have of just all the different traits, who I could attack with my predator shark, who I couldn't attack. The depth cards from an expansion, I think it was, which added even more cool things to it. It was a really fun game. I would look forward to borrowing that from Doug and getting us to play it.
Yeah, that one was really good. I loved the fact that you could put down a card and it could be its standalone creature, or it could be an added attribute to one of the creatures you already have out. I think that's awesome. Any card can be played by itself or add-on. What a great touch, and I think that's just a cool mechanic that they added to it.
Thought it was fantastic. The natural balancing between predators and the prey is that not everybody could have predators, because who would they feed off of? There was only so much that you could do if everybody had predators. It just naturally migrated that you'd have to create some more of those prey type fish, because you could feed off your own fish, so I could have a shark and the prey that he would go feed off of.
Because so many people had predators, it's so much more powerful to have all these predators out. And there's Doug over there just nice and quiet with all these filter feeders, and he kicked our butts.
I ate plenty of his fish throughout the game, but he is the one that came out with victory.
Interesting game to play, no doubt about it.
I really only had a couple highlights to add. I mean, we've already talked about a couple of them, but Fantasy Realms is a new game that, to me, great little quick filler game. Has a bunch of different methods or different strategies you can take to score points. If you haven't tried it, it's fantasy themed, thus the name Fantasy Realms. Everybody basically starts with a bunch of cards in hand, and on your turn you can draw a card until you have 7 cards in hand, and then you have to draw a card and discard a card, because 7 is your max. Trying to match certain cards with other cards in order to build a cohesive theme, really. The cards all have text that tell you how they're going to score. And some cards will say, you're going to get bonus points based on having another type of card or another specific card. The game ends when you have 7 cards in hand and there are 10 cards in the discard. When I say the discard, when you get rid of a card, you put it out on the table. You spread them out so you can keep track of how many there are, but when you draw a card, you can also choose to draw from the discard instead of the top. Once that game end is reached by everybody having 7 cards in hand and 10 cards in the discard pool on the table, game ends, count up points. Like I say, very simple, very quick. It's pretty fun.
It's very quick unless Dave picks a long strategy where he has to look through the entire deck of cards.
Dave doesn't extend the game that long.
We just played it today. He extended it a long time.
Yeah.
He doubled the time.
You're right, Nate.
You're right, Nate. So we did get to play this with the expansion with Doug. I like the cards that get added into the expansion as far as the undead and the outsiders. Dave did pretty cool stuff with the undead in the game he played. You also get cursed items, which I didn't care for. But that's because I had one that was worthless, maybe. Be interesting to play it again, just to try it and see what they were like. But the one I had, I basically couldn't use.
Yeah.
Great game. I love Fantasy Realms. That's the one that we played in the airport on our way to BGG-Con several times, and that was my first introduction to it. Great game. Plays quickly. If you're traveling, a great travel game.
The other things, we got to game with Doug a few times, sometimes over at his place. Paleo is a new game that I got to play, and that was a really fun game. One I really want to play with a different player count. We've played it with 3 players. It works. It's a cooperative game. The first time we played it, the first couple of times we played it was extremely difficult. 3rd or 4th play, we ended up winning. I liked it. It has a lot of new things.
I want to hear about Dave and Richie's anxiety with the timer. Catchphrase.
I want to hear about the furiously kissing under the mistletoe.
So we had this get together at Doug's house. Andy and Logan, you guys went downstairs. I had my wife with me, so I was playing games that she would play.
And we played fun games downstairs, we know.
We played more fun games upstairs because we were laughing, had a lot more fun than you did. So
It was a lot of fun.
we played a simple little handheld game called Catchphrase. You're given the game, it has a theme. You sit opposite of players. If Dave was sitting next to me, he's not on my team. And Logan, if you were sitting on the other side of me, not on my team. I get the device, try to get my team to say the word, and then as soon as they say it, I pass it on. However, the device has a timer that has a ticking on it, and that ticking gets progressively faster. It provides that anxiousness to the game. It was rather devastating to both Richie and David. Timer would come. It was almost like they just went into pause. They would just sit there.
Did that come across that way?
We played that a couple times. That was fun. We played some made-up game. Lydia came up with this. It was one of those party games that called it the adverb game. You had everybody in the room. One person would leave, and then the group would decide on an adverb, word that ends in ly. Then the person would come back into the room. That individual would get to ask 3 people to describe their adverb.
To act it out, not to describe it.
Yeah.
One person at a time. Call on one person and you ask them.
Example, the word was fiercely. Was it you that came back and asked this?
It was Richie.
So Richie asks Lydia, Doug's wife, describe how you would do this under the mistletoe. Lydia's trying to act out how she would fiercely kiss somebody under the mistletoe. And it is just great. She has this whole excitable, and then all of a sudden, roar, Hulk smash, kiss. It was grabbing somebody by the shoulders, and there was some serious making out going on. There was Santa Claus coming down the chimney aggressively. There was trying to shovel snow sneakily. It turned out to be a blast.
Yeah,
There was
we
a lot
laughed.
of laughs going on.
Super hard.
For one of those made-up party games, it was a blast. And somebody needs to make it a real game now, because you could totally distribute that. You're welcome.
Copyright
You're
right
welcome.
now.
New Year's Eve, I got the chance to play Faux Diamonds, Faux. Got to play that with Brent. Faux Diamonds is a trick-taking game. It's diamonds. It has a little bit different twist on it. You have these faux diamonds that you were able to progress and gain points without playing the matching suit. We also got the chance to play with Brent Seven Wonders Architects. I'm not a huge Seven Wonders fan, but Seven Wonders Architects was quite a bit different than Seven Wonders, and I actually really enjoyed the game. My wife told me afterwards, she said we didn't need it. So I ordered it.
Ouch. I ordered it.
And then also at New Year's Eve, Andy and I and Sierra and Amara got to play Drawn to Adventure. It's a game that I own. I hadn't played yet. I really enjoyed that game. It was simple. It was the last game we played of the night. We finished up about 2:30, and I was pretty done by the time we'd played Drawn to Adventure.
Well, you'd kind of been on your feet since like 11 a.m. getting everything ready for that party.
It was a big day for sure. Going way back to that same episode.
You going to bring that up again?
I am.
Really?
I just want to hit that in there. Where you said you wanted to play Terraforming Mars twice. It was also the episode that we were talking about where Dave was complaining about New Frontiers, where you could only win with
Military.
And for some reason, when we're playing New Frontiers, I just have Dave's number. Even this game where I'm doing really poorly and I've made several mistakes, I'm like right neck and neck still with Dave. I think Dave's still going to win this one.
I doubt it.
Even with the mistakes I've made, I'm right there in the game. Which is kind of weird for me. It's not a feeling I'm used to playing against Dave. But I did beat Dave collecting just novelty worlds versus his military. And I was able to defeat Dave. So when Dave said you can only win the game if you're playing military, and whoever's playing military is going to win the game,
Yep.
I proved him incorrect twice.
No, that has frustrated the crud out of me too, because I was like, oh, sweet. Finally, I get to go military and Nate's not going to be able to. And Didn't work out. Apparently, I suck at that game.
And I enjoy every minute of it. Another one that we did get to the table the last week of 2021, Transformers deck building game. I had played this game, I'd lost 3 times playing it solo, and finally was able to win the 4th time playing it solo. So I really enjoyed the game solo. So I brought it here, played it on Thursday night with 4 new players, and I hated that game. And Andy was mad after that game, too.
There was a little bit of rage after that game. Definitely not a game for 5 players.
Talked about that before, that I was both excited and kind of perplexed that the G.I. Joe deck building game was only a 4-player game, where Transformers was a 5-player game. Do not ever want to play Transformers 5 players ever again.
It definitely had some interesting concepts to it. I would have to play it again with a lesser player count, or again, just knowing the rules. I think that would make it a lot better.
Well, I was teaching 4 new players, so there was that learning curve. That could have a lot to do with how the game went.
I'm sure it did.
But yeah, I was angry at the end of the game.
Still with 5 players, it was pretty boggy.
We were playing the cooperative version. There's a competitive version. I want to try that too, to see how that turns out.
I'm looking at it to other deck builders that could be 5 players. If you get enough expansions for Dominion, for example, you can play it 5 players. As much as I love Dominion, I don't like it at 5 players. 4 players is easily the max. I like 3 players. There's just certain games, even though you can play in 5 players,
doesn't mean you should.
Doesn't mean you necessarily should. And I think, at least with our first experience with Transformers, I think it falls into that category.
Like Firefly?
Firefly.
Like Firefly.
Even if we did the competitive, I think it would still fall into that category. Just looking at the gameplay, I think it would just still bog down a lot.
And I think I might have an issue with it competitive too. How you built your decks. It was interesting how it would be built, but cooperative, at least it really didn't matter from round to round if somebody had an amazing turn. There was quite often that people were making a whole lot more energy than I was. If it was competitive, I don't know how being able to stack up against that.
Not only that, I think with the competitive side of it, which we'd have to play it competitive to know if it would work like this, but it seems like you could really hose someone over by taking the card they're on top of, and if it ends up being a Decepticon underneath and they end up getting attacked because they're on the card, some cutthroat stuff that could happen with competitive version of that game.
Still, we need to give that a shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is also the first release of this game. The next expansion is supposed to introduce Decepticons to make it more so players are playing Decepticons versus Autobots. So the game has some evolution that will be coming. But still, I loved the game solo. A lot of that was controlled pace of the game. Everybody was doing what I wanted them to do in my solo game, so it worked out great.
I would be concerned if that was not the case.
Yes, yeah. Some of our gaming highlights, we've eaten up well over our normal amount of time, but we still always use this first news episode of the year to talk about past gaming goals. So I just wanted to hit on mine. For the year, I had a gaming goal to play 500 games. I went a little bit over that. And for the year, I got 819 gameplays in, which was exciting. November was my highest month with 118.
What did we do in November?
BGG for one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
The lowest month I had was, I start off slow. There's no way I'm going to reach 500. So January, I only had 40 gameplays. But by the end, 819 gameplays. I had a 10 by 10, was able to complete early December. And then I had a 30 by 10, which is more of a fluid list that comes naturally throughout the year. There's a game that we pick up we really like. 30 by 10 was done actually close to August. Playing 500 games was in September. The 10 by 1, 10 specific games that had to be played once during the year. The last game on my list was Star Wars Rebellion. And I found a solo variant on BGG, and it was terrible. But I make these similar goals each year. I make 7 goals, 500 games, 150 games to play with my wife, 10 by 10, which is 10 specific games played 10 times, 10 by 1, 10 specific games played once, 30 by 10 will include those 10 by 10s, but often will exceed that. So like this year, I have 34 games that I played 10 times and 17 games that I played at least 5 times. With 161 different people, 103 of those people were named in the app. Played 192 different games throughout the year. Overall, pretty good years. Setting some similar goals for this year and hope to be able to achieve those just as easily. What were your top 5 games, Andy? You talked about Pop the Pig, number 3, beat out by Skull.
Which was number 2. Gloomhaven was my number 1. 4th and 5th were tied. It was Taverns of Tiefenthal and Descent Legends of the Dark.
I'm actually kind of surprised that Taverns didn't beat out Legend.
Yeah, I've played it a lot this year, but we've played Descent solidly since we got it, pretty much. So
Yeah.
14 plays in it.
I'm impressed because you almost doubled my number of plays, my 486.
But you still beat me in December.
At least we can focus on that.
Yeah. By 6 games.
By 6 games.
Well exceeded our time slot. So, sorry. Not sorry? I don't know.
Until next time.
We'll see you having a great year in 2022 at the game table.
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter, @Meeple Nation. We also have Instagram.
Under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and they have so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Braden Detergent for our music.
Meeple Nation, January 2022 news. 2022 news.
And there was one other thing, but I can't remember.
All right.
Surprise, surprise.
It was a lot of fun. There was Santa Claus? There was Santa Claus coming down the chimney aggressively, and
Wait, you're not saying goodnight to somebody?
I'm going to edit it out
Good night, Logan.
because it's still creepy. Remember, if you sign up on Patreon, Dave will wish you good night too.